GM everyone, and welcome to Identity Unleashed. I'm Titus. I'm the VP of Go-to-Market at Civic, where we empower developers with privacy-preserving tools for user and identity management. Now, this podcast dives into how digital identity is transforming industries by this intersection of Web2 and Web3. We're here at ETHDenver 2025. Super excited to be able to do a community podcast here. And then, as usual, before we begin, please don't forget to click that like button, subscribe to our channels, follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. So today we have this special in-person episode. We're here with Christophe, Olivier from Gelato Network. We'll explore how Civic can integrate with the Gelato Rollups-as-a-Service marketplace. Figure out how to bring reusable identity to people launching their own rollups. We'll discuss the marketplace purpose, pros, cons of using rollup as a service, or Kubernetes design, what needs to take into consideration, pivotal role it has in the ecosystem. So, I think I'm excited to have a great episode ahead of us. Thank you for joining us. And maybe kick it off with a short introduction about yourself and about Gelato.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Titus, as well, for having us and for having me here. Very excited and pumped to be here. I think ETHDenver is a great event in general, and I'm very excited to deep dive a bit more into all the projects and all of the topics that you've mentioned in details, and how essentially Gelato helps a lot of different projects, either from the customer side of things, or also from vendor landscape in general.
Awesome. Yeah, so these conferences are super interesting and a great place to mingle. Have you had any favorite moments, any kind of key, unexpected, or funny new memories from these conferences? What's like?
Right, no, for sure. I think there's a couple of highlights as usual. When you go to these events, there's the main events, of course, where you get to mingle and network with a lot of different people doing very different things within the Web3 space. You have these enterprise people, you also have retail, you have also people building very cool applications, protocols, and so on. I mean, I was just, yesterday playing at a poker game, and, there was about 250 or 300 people. It was just a great event, just network and play a fun game with a lot of crypto folks in general. And I think that was just a great networking place as well overall. So, very excited to be here. I think, it's also sets itself a bit apart from other conferences as well, because, you have this main event that is huge with all of these booths where you get to network and talk with a lot of different people, but also, the side events, the private events as well. Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, for me, I think it's always about getting that in-person connection that you can't really get on the calls and the kind of Zooms or whatever you're doing with your BD sales process and whatnot. Working together on the same thing in person is such a refreshing thing. But this is the biggest conference of the quarter, I guess. Nick, in terms of kind of diving into what you guys did about Gelato and Rollup, it's what inspired you guys to build that? What was it for? How does it work? If you quote.
No, 100%. So in a very short set, if I were to give it a two-liner sort of explanation, essentially we can deploy blockchains, infrastructures, right? So layer 2s, layer 3s. We even have our own tech stack, which is called ABC. We also support different tech stack framework, namely Arbitrum Orbit and OP stack. And essentially we run an end-to-end solutions for projects that want to build either a general purpose chain or an application-specific chains. We run everything, so we deploy, maintain, and upgrade the network. And we can also implement with a lot of different infrastructures providers, so bridges, account abstraction, oracles, of course, identity integrations as well, and a bunch of other projects. So we run about 40 chains now in productions using very different setups and configurations. One, I think, of the most recent sort of big projects that launched with us is Inc., so the L2 by Kraken. So we're very excited about working with them in general.
I have my own thoughts about this, but I want to hear some. It's why do people choose to build their own chain versus using existing structure?
Right. No, that's a pretty good question as well. So there's a couple of reasons for it, right? A lot of people, they would perhaps just want to launch, the application or protocol on top of Base, on top of Solana, which are the two, I would say, probably biggest networks by mindshare and, user and liquidity in general. But what we've seen as well is a lot of people want to first have their own block space, because what we see is, for example, if you were to launch your application on Base, and there's 400 protocols or 500, I don't know, I didn't check, but last time I checked it was about that numbers. If there's, for example, like an NFT mint that happens on Base that is super hyped up, then maybe the gas price will spike up. There will be network congestions, RPC cloggage, you name it. And, projects building on top of specific networks don't maybe necessarily want to be impacted by other activities within that network. And so what we see is like projects moving slowly towards building their own chains. And that can come with very different flavors as well. So that's one of the reasons. Second is they want to also own the entire user, journey and funnel. This is what we see, for example, with Coinbase and Base, right, where a lot of the user liquidity on the centralized exchange itself, but they also flock then towards, the on-chain components of Base. And I think this is like a use case we see more and more with existing projects, whether they're like Web2 projects or Web3 native projects in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's more like, in my mind, DPS, like shared server versus like having your own dedicated instance.
Absolutely.
Like Web2 comparison. So I'm curious, like, this is the new service, development service. Like, was there a moment in the journey, like building, like that made you think like, yes, we're onto something here? Like, how did this kind of come by?
Right. So, we historically speaking, we're actually around for like 6 years now in the space. We started with smart contract automation. This is how a lot of people got to know us as well. We were live on like MakerDAO, RV, and a bunch of other DeFi protocols back then. And we sort of, took these learnings and the expertise, and we're like, okay, how can we scale that up further and provide more services based on the needs of the customers that we see? And one of the needs was the Rollup-as-a-Service, because we believe that eventually there will be maybe 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 rollups. And I think this is a very exciting space to be in, because essentially people will launch their chain, and then they will want to have like a bunch of different infrastructures on top of it. And we have a Gelato native modules on top of it, which are, the relay, which is a multi-chain account abstraction, bundler and paymaster as well. We have Web3 functions, our contract automation, and VRF, which stand for verifiable randomness. And we work, of course, with 60 or 70 now different infrastructure providers across many different verticals that we can serve on the rollups.
Yeah. Awesome. But then when it comes to these rollup, it's like, this come to you. What are just some of the challenges that come with? What are some different?
Right. So it really depends on one project to the other. I think what we've seen a lot is there's sometimes like a strong need for customization, right? Because there's a lot of projects that come in and like, hey, we will need to have XYZ features enabled on our chain. How do we go about it? Should we fork the stack? Should we make some customization work? And it turns out that actually there's a lot of education work to do, because a lot of projects they know what they want, but they don't know on how to go about it. And so this is also where we come in as a RaaS providers. We don't only deploy the infrastructures for the project, we'll also come as a consultant, and we advise them on the best approach. And turns out, like for 99% of the projects and use cases, that there's a lot of existing tools and infrastructure that already exist in Web3 that can serve the specific needs of a project. And so there's not maybe that need of like customization per se. So yeah, there's a lot of like essentially help, consultancy, advice, and guiding the projects from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, no, I mean, like one of the things I'm seeing in the crypto space, and I'm a little concerned about it, most people try to build instead of buy in some cases, but the problem is already solved. So for me, it's like you're spending all this time, cycles, dev research, people's attention on things that are essentially pieces of the puzzle that you can bring to the table, instead of building it from scratch. And I get there's a cost of ownership, and I get there's like an ongoing maintenance cost for some of these tools, but ultimately the time and effort spent building a solution that's like state of the art or cutting edge would be better off spent building your core offering and your core product and getting to market quicker and getting going and getting those users into activation.
Yeah, that's a very good point you're actually mentioning as well. And this is also why a lot of people actually choose RaaS or Rollup-as-a-Service, is because they realize that if they want to launch their chain, they would need a lot of resources that they had not sort of prepared for initially, because you would have to essentially hire a team of engineers and developers to figure out everything from beginning to end. It's not like there's a lot of developers that have launched, 10 or 15 rollups in their career. And so that becomes even more relevant in that scene, because project then realize, okay, that's going to cost me, I don't know, let's say we need to hire 6 or 8 developers or engineers. It's going to take us 6 to 7 months to figure out the entire process end to end. We'll probably run into some issues or dependencies, or would not know on how to debug certain aspects of, deploying the infrastructure itself. It will also cost a lot of money, because you would have to, pay for these people, pay for the salary, figure out maybe some pieces that will come along the way, bug fixes and so on. And they could just come to us, and we're able to drastically reduce those costs down, and also enabling users and projects in that case, to just focus on the core business offering, as opposed to sort of spread themselves too thin and focus on the infrastructure layer, on marketing, on product, on distribution, and so on. So we really come in as a key sort of partner and providers as well when it comes to RaaS. So it's not only about deploying the chain in the infrastructure, but it comes with the entire array of all the features that I've just mentioned.
It makes total sense. So I was like doing the math in my head, 6 to 8 developers. Depending on your geography, it could be anywhere from $500,000 to like 1.2, 1.5 million, just to get this off the ground, which is fake. And not to mention the maintenance cost. Like, because you launch it, you build it, but then you have to kind of maintain it, all the DevOps overhead, all the bug fixes, preventive problems.
Exactly, and this is something we see, right? I mean, we work very closely with the Optimism team, the Arbitrum team as well, whenever we deploy, rollups and chains in general using either one of these stacks. And, there's always like upgrades, they always like try to improve as well, the stack framework, or different features within, these frameworks in general. And this is something that we also take care of, so that we try to abstract away as many complexities as possible, while also handling all of the backend ourselves, so that the projects don't really have to think about it, essentially.
So, I mean, we recently kind of joined your marketplace with Civic, but bringing identity to these rollups is something we're really excited about. Like, kind of want to hear from you. What do you think this means for developers, for the end users? Like, how can this kind of improve quick?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, I mean, here there's very different, areas. I think we can maybe start off with maybe the marketplace itself. So essentially, we have like a curated list of infrastructure providers. It's not like, hey, there's just like an infrastructure that comes in like, hey, can we be listed on the marketplace? It doesn't really work like that, unfortunately. But yeah, we go through like a process of curating the list. We check, the track record of, XYZ project, whether they've, gotten some traction already in the space, if they've been around for a while, what type of like use cases it needs to their address. And then based on that, we will also list them on the marketplace. So then we have different verticals, like oracles, bridges, identity, and so on. And we usually refer like 2 or 3 key partners for each one of these areas. And this is how we go about the RaaS marketplace in general. For identity specifically, I think there's like stronger needs than what we've seen historically. And I think the reason comes from a lot of the data that can be skewed as well in terms of volume, number of transactions, amount of active wallets. I mean, you can sort of gamify those numbers a lot, and that can also wrongly lead, a certain user or projects towards a certain area in general. And I think this becomes very interesting both at the application level as well as the ecosystem level, where I think we'll see more and more of these decentralized ID that will essentially power through the entire ecosystem and network in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a blockchain problem across all the chains that we see, where people are trying to spoof activity. One, it's like that's kind of like where the anti-bot narrative kind of there. You want to make sure you know what bots you have on your network, and if there's good bots or bad bots, keep the one bad bot out.
Exactly, and I think the identity as well becomes even more relevant now that we've seen, so many different projects have airdropped to the users. We've seen some backlashes on the community for certain airdrops. without name dropping any. Also in terms of activity, like we've seen like wash trading happening. We've seen number of like active wallets or just active users really on the rise for certain projects we didn't really hear about in the past. So I think there's a stronger need for that as well. I think if you were to tie that up to like a web sort of use case, it's like, when you have these social logins and you log in with your email, you sort of recognize that sort of entity now, and then you can interact within all of these different accounts and platforms that you use. And I think we would be leaning towards that as well in Web3 in general, where your identity will act almost as a single point of truth. So I think it will start off first at, the application or ecosystem that you interact with, and it will slowly expand maybe to other chains or other networks even to satisfy and fulfill certain use cases.
Yeah, for me, like this kind of brings back memories from 50 years ago when it became like advertising. We were looking at initially at like impressions, eyeballs and all that stuff. And then once unique users started getting tractions and ways to track that and correlate that activity, that completely changed the game in like how we look at reach and how we look at like the activity app. Because you might have like a super intensely used application, or in this case, Rollup or chain. But then again, there's only a handful of people behind it, or even worse, one person running a huge bot farm operation doing that. And kind of going back to your airdrop example and more distribution in general, I think that's where we see a lot of groups specialize in Sybil attacks nowadays. Doing let's say 100,000 airdrop, you can be sure that you'll have at least 10 to 15 Sybil rings, try to get in there and 100, 200, 300 users each, try to harvest as many rewards as they can from that ecosystem, not more. So I think bringing some sort of humanity to these ecosystems, I think that's where identity comes in. And you can do it like from heavier-handed approaches where you KYC everyone with the government ID. You can do like a lighter touch biometric. You can do a uniqueness verification, biometrics, liveness. We can just do a CAPTCHA if it's an incentivized test, and that's like, I just want to keep more basic.
Right, no, 100%. And I think, also, that I see it in, two different categories as well. You have the off-chain components and you also have the on-chain components. And I think now a lot of these, decentralized ID in general, they operate also like on a lot of off-chain data, right? When you have to connect your Twitter account, your Google account, LinkedIn, whatever, you name it. And then you can sort of transition that off-chain data into an on-chain NFT or soul-bound token, whatever you want to do with it. And I think that becomes even more relevant because then you have an actual on-chain relevance and provenance from having all of that, data essentially that is getting stored. I think another point, which is quite interesting in general is the purpose that the decentralized ID also sort of serve. And I think there's maybe sometimes a misalignment between users and the project, because of course project want to pump up their metrics because it would just look better and you would get better marketing and you know the drill. But also I think the project would have to be incentivized one way or the other to also run this campaign, because I'm not sure whether a project would prefer to have maybe 1,000 very high quality users and a very strong community, or should they maybe prefer to have 20K, 30K users that are a bit more questionable in terms of the real activity that they bring on the protocol. So I think these are like maybe some consideration to maybe take into account moving forward on how this will exactly play out. I think we're still a bit early as well, but I'm definitely very excited about what you guys do at Civic as well, and the different types of identity play that comes into the market in general.
I think for us, what we want to do, like talk to you in various contexts, is like how can we educate and the values thing. This is the people coming in with capital, the people coming in for spending, like everyone to take into consideration the real metrics, not the metrics comes to these audience. Because even if you might see like a flashy 20, 30, 50 people a day, 50K people a day, allegedly, and then you're actually seeing like 90% of that is bot activity, then I'd rather know that off the bat than be surprised later when after the rewards run out or been distributed, everything goes, I think that's the worst outcome we can have as a builder, as an investor, as a member, as like you name it, what's it, that ecosystem.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think we're going to move more and more towards a sort of incentive scheme where every sort of stakeholder incentivized to show real data and to show real usage as opposed to, yeah, as you mentioned, bot activity or maybe, falsely reported just activity in general. And so I think there's a lot of ways to really go about it, and I think there's a lot of projects in space that are brainstorming about the different ideas on how can I monetize even my ID. I mean, this is to the point that you were mentioning earlier with the Facebook ads or like just the Web2 ads in general. Like a lot of companies, Web2 traditional companies are willing to pay a lot of money to make very specific target ads to very specific users. And I think this is something that we'll see in Web3. The difference is that these users then will be able to monetize their identity or their usage across very different networks or about a certain networks in specific.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how we are able to do that as an ecosystem without creating like the spam that ended up happening Web2 with a lot of these. Like if I want to market, for example, to everyone who has a wallet with more than $20 equivalent, and that creates kind of a niche that everyone will try to target because that's the disposable coin.
No, that's true. And then, that begs the question, what sort of criteria do you value? And I think those criteria would depend a lot based on the project use case that you have, right? But whether you build a gaming application, you build a prediction market, you build a perp dexes, I think this criteria will be very different one way or the other. And you would want to reward users based on certain activities on a certain network and not make that sort of global across all of the different ecosystem that currently exist on the blockchain.
Yeah, because I feel like while we have all these chains, it's very hard to ultimately communicate with the end user and the end customer, the end community member. Because ultimately you have to default to like Twitter or X. You have to default to like email campaign. You have to default kind of like the Web2 tools. So I'm hopeful that the comms layer will come live and become more prevalent. You have a few inklings of projects in that direction, but there's nothing that went RaaS street. I think that kind of went into the other questions that I had around the evolution of blockchain and identity. On that, okay, if you want to add anything for that,
I mean, I don't know if you have any specific question, like specifically that you want me to...
I mean, maybe in 5 years, like, when do you say infrastructure and identity?
Oh, right. I think in terms of infrastructures, there will be a lot of different progress that will be made. I think we'll be aiming towards more and more of a decentralized world. You always have this take like, hey, blockchain right now is still too centralized, and this is not what blockchain was made of initially, which is true. But I think like any technology that is sort of ever growing, you figure out steps as you move along. And we're also like big part of decentralization at Gelato, and we're trying to always invest and allocate resources to sort of make a better and more decentralized world. Realistically speaking, is not as easy and seamless because otherwise a lot of projects would have already done that. So I think I'm very hopeful in the future that we're aiming towards a more decentralized world with just better UX, better UI, and it would just feel like as if you interact with any sort of websites or web browsers that we currently have with the Web2 mean. Now, in terms of decentralized ID, I'm actually very excited about the on-chain components that will come into play and how both projects and user will be also able to monetize them. Because also, that's a big part of the blockchain industry is how can I monetize XYZ? Like if you were paid to do all of these Google search, for example, on Google, like probably a lot of people would be rich by now, but it's not really the case. And I think there will be like a very strong demand and need in general for projects to utilize these tools that the decentralized ID providers make and how they will come into play and effect on-chain, because this is actually where the value prop is, right? Like when you go to a certain platform like yours, for example, and you have the Civic pass, and then you can meet an NFT based on the number of points you gathered or based on your historical activity on-chain, that translates into like a real usage that you cannot really fake. Maybe that can open up like another Pandora box where, people will maybe able to sell their wallet address I don't know. I've never seen that before.
We have.
We have.
And,
Okay.
and there's a way to mitigate that. If you like verify people again, like with a softer touch,
Right.
and ensure that continuity of the wallet. Because yeah, they do it, especially with the Sybil farms.
Yeah.
Like they'll just like do a, 10,000 people harvest all the wallets and faces.
Right. No, that's true.
One bucket, and then try to sell the private keys, and then like you re-verify, then you foil the plan. It's very hard to coordinate people twice.
For sure. I mean, yeah, you are the identity expert here. So yeah, I think this is definitely true. I think this is also was something that happened with Layer Zero with the airdrop campaign as well, where we could see these like massive Sybil sort of clusters. They were able to identify a lot. I don't know if they were able to identify everything, but I think we're also making good progress towards that front. And there'll also be new tools coming up into the market, right? I think there will be already like established infrastructure providers that will come with, a lot of different flavors and use cases. But as well as we move along this industry over time, we'll be able to address more needs. And I think this is why it's also very important to address this product feedback that we see. And I think this is also how we were able to like grow a lot within Gelato itself, is because we're able to take on the learnings that we had over the last few years and really apply that on a continuous basis based on what the projects request, the project's needs, project use cases, and where they want to be essentially 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the line.
And I feel like I want to come back to what you said about the on-chain component of it. I feel like if you are building something in the Web3 space, you're still doing identity verification with Web 2 only companies and Web 2 results. It's kind of like doing e-commerce, but like asking people to pay at the door to the courier, which is still a thing in some parts of the world. But like this was a way of like, we did things back in the day on like when the internet was still an emerging part of the business, not the core part of the business. Whereas now it's like, I can't even imagine ordering something online and then having cash exact change with me at the door to pay for it. And I think in that the same way, what builders will deploy, it'll be unthinkable to have to store your own data of your customers and be at risk of a hack and all that stuff that comes with it, versus having an on-chain proof that is recognizable and valid, and that's attached to some encrypted data somewhere that you can ping as needed. But physical comes in what's happening today.
Yeah, and I think that also ties it up back to the technology side of things, right? Where maybe we'll be also enable ZK proofs as well at the protocol or chain levels to really authenticate, where does the activity come from? What sorts of usage does XYZ user have historically speaking? And I think these on-chain components will become very important essentially down the line, because this is also why we build on the blockchain, is to have this sort of transparent ledger that people can refer to. And I think that will become ever more relevant and interesting as the space matures.
I have a hot take on the ZK stuff. I think the blockchain itself, the block sequencing, the securing of each block, should be enough compute, enough cryptography to be able to secure the attestation of your chain without the added need for the ZK compute that comes with like kind of the traditional ZK approaches. That's why like we at Civic, we opted to more of a SBT soulbound token approach that's secured by the block it's been like issued in, and then you can modify your state for it, but you don't kind of have to carry the compute with it, the cost, the time, the effort that goes with it.
100%, and I 100% agree with that take actually. And I think ZK tech, as good as it is, I think we're still like a year or two maybe away from really like integrating that at scale, that it becomes really relevant. I think with the existing tools, infrastructures, that especially needs that we have, I don't think there's like a very strong appeal for ZK proofs per se. I think that's gonna come eventually because that's a great technology. It's just not also something that is applicable across all blockchains, all use cases, just all projects in general. So I definitely go by what you're saying in general. And I think soulbound tokens, it's a pretty straightforward way to go, but that's more than enough for currently what we have in the world.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and ask you about some of the kind of projects, protocols you've seen here at ETHDenver. Any things that you want to call out, any kind of promising tools or teams?
No, 100%. I think what I've been seeing is a shift back towards DeFi protocols in general. I've been talking with a lot of DeFi projects, building across many different networks. across Solana, across Sui, Say, of course on Base, very different networks. And I think we're seeing more a shift towards what we have seen on the past year or two across, meme coins, AI agents, and so on, which were like a bit of a craze and pump and dump sort of mania back to like utility projects. And I think this is very interesting to see. I mean, I'm a big meme trader, so I'm not, complaining about these people in general, but I just think it's also great to go back to the roots of the blockchain and how it really started initially with all of these DeFi components and how we can address the fragmented liquidity problems, how we can aggregate different liquidity pools across many different networks and protocols. So yeah, I think this is what we've been seeing at ETHDenver mostly.
Yeah, this is like for me, kind of coming back to what I see at DEF CON as well. We're moving from a world where like the kind of religious beliefs of having to hold your own keys directly was very embedded in the space. And I think we've reached kind of a saturation of number of people that want to understand and want to learn about like private cryptography. And to get the next like billion people into crypto, want to essentially simplify a lot of the infrastructure to the point where, like we do on the internet nowadays, nobody cares if you're running AWS or Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure on your bare metal server in your garage. What matters is I can use your app in a secure way. And I think we are on our route to get there with account abstraction, chain abstraction, with cross-chain liquidity, to the point where somebody can come in with an email address or their Google account or their GitHub or their X account, create one of those accounts, and then start using the blockchain tool without having to go through 2, 3, 4 hours learning cycle of understanding what gas. Where do I get the coin that I need for this chain? Why do I need this coin here and that coin there? Oh no, now I'm out of gas coins. What do I do? These are really bad user experience examples that we've been kind of ignoring for the past few years. And I think to the nature of a lot of the people that come into the space, they're sort of tech savvy, if not very tech savvy, if not actually developers. And it's easy for, I think, all of us to kind of come in and assume that, oh, everyone will understand this. It's easy, natural. Whereas if you go on the street and ask people hey, what are private keys? What's a cryptographic program signature? What are you talking about?
Exactly. And to the point, I think, a lot of people that get into crypto as well, they don't want to bother with all of that technology and, what is ZK proofs? Why does, XYZ chain is different than XYZ protocol? And I think, when I got into crypto in 2021, there were all of these tools that we talk about, right? Like wallet as a service, account abstraction, chain abstraction, relay to sponsor gas fees, for example, which is one of the also services that we have didn't really exist in the market or were not as developed as they currently are. And so there were a lot of heavy lifting to get on board and what is a centralized exchange? How do I move my funds from chain A to chain B? How do I withdraw funds from the centralized exchange that I'm currently in to network B? And I think we're moving towards more and more of those, of that space where we actually want to make it as seamless as possible for users to onboard crypto without bothering them with all of the technical aspect, because realistically speaking, they don't actually need to know, want to know, or really care too much about. What they want is just to probably have a good time, have a very easy user experience in general, depending on why you want on the blockchain in the first place. And I think we're going also more and more towards that eventually. And this is why we also strive to be, at Gelato, is that sort of one-stop shop for all, where people can just come in and okay, here's one key provider, this is the second key provider, maybe we'll go no more than 2, and they can just self-serve everything. And then we are here to sort of guide them, advise them. We'll work more, of course, on the B2B side of things, so with other existing projects in the space. But then at the end of the day, this project will serve end users, right? And maybe you can think it as a B2B2B model or a B2B2B2BC model. And I think this is also what's currently happening in the crypto industry. And we might see more and more of those features integrated in.
And so I think when it comes to working with developers, that's one piece where we love to get a lot of feedback, and I'm sure you guys do the same. I'm curious to learn from you, how you learn from you guys, like, what are some of the best practices getting developer feedback and how to kind of
No, that's a great question. So, I mean, the great thing is we work with so many different projects in the space doing so many different things, right? That can span from like a centralized exchange launching the chain to a prediction market going for AI agents, perp dexes, social fi, and so on. They're building so many different, characteristic and features on chain, and they use so many different tools for that we can really pinpoint what is their issues and struggles. And when we see, 2, 3, or 4 times the same struggle popping up, we're like, okay, there's an issue. We should definitely address that. How can we best address that? And so we have a team of like engineers and, developer relations team that actually address that on a regular and continuous basis. So we have like GitHub repos, we have like YouTube tutorials videos. You can also jump on calls with a, specific DevRel team in general. We get a feedback either on like a written format or, verbally as well. So like there's a lot of different ways to go about it. We also have like docs online that it teaches you on how to go from, A to Z essentially on integrating specific protocols. We also have like PRs and so on. So the list really extends. We try to be as detailed and precise as possible. We also, of course, have to allocate certain resources internally to what matters most. So it's a question of priority at the end of the day. But I think we're doing a great job as onboarding, explaining, advising as much as possible. What do the current developers need in that current landscape and framework?
And I think what I want to see in the crypto space, also on our side and in general, is solutionize. Make sure that you get in front of the customers, kind of like wants, needs, and even if your product is like not super customizable, it's like a simple solution, you can still kind of educate them on, hey, here's the best way to use this, and this is how you integrate to avoid the common pitfalls, or this is how you would get the best result. And the same way I give that example with the face farm attack prevention, right? You might want to do an identity check at the beginning of the person's journey when they first come into your community. And then maybe let's say a week or 2 or 3 pass, they go through tasks and whatnot. And then when it comes to claiming some rewards, then maybe it's worth verifying them again. Because like the verification, okay, while it's still valid, technically because it's valid for 30 days or 90 days or however you secure it, they might have sold their private key in the meantime. Or they're running like an automation farm somewhere with like thousands of phones, whatever. And this still happens in the Web3 world, by the way. Like, found this guy somewhere essentially scamming YouTube with tens of thousands of individual phones, and they're signing on his live stream, and then he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars from advertisers thinking that they're promoting their products to real people.
Right. And, to the point as well, I think, we have, for example, this 2FA authentication as well in the Web2 world already, where you have to receive, like a text message and a phone call or code through email. And people don't mind as much because they know it's an additional layer of security for whatever they want to protect in general. And I think in Web3 it will be even better because user will also be incentivized to do so, right? Because then if you actually go through that process and others don't, then it means there's less dilution, meaning there will be higher rewards for you. So by creating this sort of additional layer of security and friction in a way, but it's a sort of positive friction as well because it benefits the end users, but it also benefits the protocols it's chain. And so I think that become very relevant. And, in Web2, historically speaking, yeah, of course, that can be a bit annoying, but, for example, if you were to log into Binance or any centralization that you want to use or to your bank account, or like any company software tools, you're more than happy to go through the 2FA authentication because otherwise you might get screwed and you don't want to hold that responsibility as well.
At this point, I'm like 3FA or more is possible. And at least one component is like not tied to something that's at risk. Like I would have something on my phone, something that I remember, and then something that's connected to my phone number. And between those 3, I have the assurance that like the value that I'm trying to protect is hard enough to get to by the bad. I feel that that's another symptom of like, well, we were comfortable with email and password for the longest of time with banks because there wasn't maybe as much value in there on a regular basis. People just go and then withdraw the money as soon as they get the salaries. Whereas now we're all kind of keeping our financial systems in the virtual world, and credit cards, debit cards, not cash. They actually don't accept cash anymore. And I feel like with crypto as well, like you could, if your wallet contains a amount that you'd be very uncomfortable losing, you want to add that protection. And personally, I want to see wallets bring more of the identity component into their ecosystem, as opposed to like pushing it out to the customer to kind of protect themselves. So I feel like we've been through enough cycles already. I've been in crypto since 2017, and it's always like, at the wallet point where most of the hacks happen. We've seen the latest like safe issue with the UI being replaced, like a repo that was compromised. Like, how can we build more humanity/ownership checks into the otherwise critical infrastructure?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I mean, as much as I'm a Web3 crypto native and I'm interacting on the blockchain a lot, I don't have even a self-custodial wallet on my phone. Because, as you said, right, I'm a bit uncomfortable, like holding a certain amount of money directly onto my phone. Maybe there's not I think there's additional layers of security on the laptop. I mean, it depends on what you do on the laptop as well, right? So I think it depends from like a person to a person, but I know I would trust myself a bit more on what I do on my laptop than what I would do on my phone. But then, of course, that can, vary a lot from, different peoples in general.
So speaking of now, like crypto experience, like you said, you came into the space in 2021. What's kind of a piece of advice you want to give to your younger self?
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so many things I would say to my younger self, but I think one of the key take is to be more patient. I think, a lot of people, they come in crypto for the money, and they end up staying for the vision and the narrative and, all of the cool technology that comes with it. And I think I was a bit too greedy initially to make, a ton of money. I know I was able to, of course, make a bit of money over the years, but I think what's really important is to stay patient, know why you are in the game, know what you're doing, and, what sort of purpose or, thing that you contribute in the ecosystem or in the industry in general. And I think then all of the success sort of will flow in naturally as well. So that would probably be my my hottest sort of advice I would give, probably like some others, but that would probably be the most important thing.
All right, and then what's kind of like a myth or a misconception about blockchain or Web3 that you wish people would stop believing?
Let me think about that for a minute. Yeah, I think a lot of people actually would come in and think they can make a lot of money so easily because they've heard that, hey, they saw that screenshot on Twitter, like that XYZ made like $1 million off, a trade, or, they sniped like a certain token at launch and everything. Realistically speaking, it's not as easy, right? And I think a lot of people get skewed as well by all of these KOLs and PRs and VCs that invest a ton of money into certain projects. And some of them are very successful. But at the end of the day, for each successful entity or users that you have, there's a lot also on the other hand that have lost a lot of money. And of course, it's not as sexy and glamorous to talk about it and to brag about it. But that's also the reality of the space that we're in. And I think a bit more, transparency and expectation management in general would be definitely helpful. I mean, that applies when, you trade or when you invest, but I think that can also be sort of translated and extrapolated across a lot of different things that happens at the blockchain level. And that goes actually back to the point of the conversation we're making earlier, where we're talking, okay, which sort of data is skewed, which one is real, which one is a real user, which one is not. And I think just more transparency in general, because this is also why we build on the blockchain, right? Is to have this sort of public ledger that is accessible to everyone, that is immutable, right? And yeah, I think that would be what we should go back toward, is more like what initially blockchain was rolled out into and the specific purpose that it's sort of addressed as well at the beginning.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's a great take. And I think from my side, one of the best misconception else is this push for anonymity at all costs. I think there's a level of information that can disclose about ourselves that can be helpful for the ecosystem without having to fully dox everyone. But I think there are things and some good case practices that can be implemented that way. Whereas if you end up undermine everything, then open the door for enemies, sanctioned individuals, bad actors come in and disrupt whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And, I've seen a lot of backlashes as well about, KOLs, influencers, and, token allocation being given to certain projects at a certain time. And I think, it's a very hard problem to address because, certain actors or stakeholders are incentivized to act this way while others are not. And it comes, unfortunately, at the detriment of these people. And I think this will also be like something very important to address. And we don't have to dox everybody, but I think being sort of like sanctioned or held accountable for what you do would be very important. I mean, this is what we saw with Libra, right? 2 weeks ago, where that Argentinian president pumped that token to whatever, 4 or 5 billion market cap in a span of a few hours, right? And then the token price completely crashed, and there was a bunch of insiders who made money off of it, and a lot of people also lost money. I mean, I know there's two sides of the story and two sides of the coin here. Like, nobody forced anyone to trade that token to begin with, which is true. But also, I think there should be also some limits on what you should do in a permissionless manner or what. So, essentially, it boils down back to what is right, what is wrong, what is ethical, what is not, what is legal and what is not. But it's also like a problem we face, in the world in general, right? So that sort of translates or spill over to Web3 as well. But I guess this is like an ongoing issue that we'll have to solve slowly as time progresses.
And I feel like because Web3 is so kind of border agnostic, I want to say, label, I see the clashes of the different cultures, the different kind of moral, different ethic code, and kind of try to figure out kind of a good medium for all of the tools method. Very sure. Cool. So I know we're coming up on time, so I want to ask you kind of as a closing thought, what's next for you guys at Gelato? What's like exciting coming up?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're asking this question. So we recently launched our new stack, which is called ABC. And it's a very interesting model or framework that we based on. So essentially, we've been running 40 chains in production, as I was saying earlier during this conversation. And we've seen all of the pros and cons and trade-offs of running all of this tech stack in production using very different configuration and setup. And what we've realized is there's an actual need for maybe a sovereign rollup, like a sovereign sort of chain infrastructures layer where you don't actually scale ETH per se, but you're more focused around your application. And how do we achieve that is we actually remove this enshrined bridge that connects the L1 to the L2 or the L2 to the L3, depending on which architecture you decide to go with. And we essentially build like 100% EVM-based stack rollup that is extremely performance, operating at nearly zero gas fees, that enables you to really scale your application and be integrated and interconnected with all different networks that you want, sort of out of the box. So you can be connected to Solana, Bitcoin, Arbitrum Base, any networks of your choosing, while processing also a lot of compute on chain. So I would say that this tech stack framework has been addressed and also implemented for a lot of different use cases. But what I see the most is for prediction market, perp dexes, gaming, AI engines, and on-chain payments, which are actually 5 of the verticals that were the most bullish on at Gelato, as well as RWA. And so, to also have enterprise-grade rollups, we work also with a lot of different enterprises in the space. And what we see is that there's a stronger needs for regulations, off-fact compliance, running multiple, sequencers, maybe make some customization at the sequencer level, which are not currently possible on the canonical version of the existing tech stack framework in the industry, but we're actually able to do with it ABC. So I think there's a lot of different projects now that will be launching on ABC. We have about 15 to 20 projects already live on testnet. We've already signed a few first contracts with the first few minutes coming up in March, so next month. So I think that will be very exciting times, to just keep building and just keep innovating in general. So our goal is always to onboard more projects into, of course, our ecosystem and to launch more chain and service more projects in general and address very specific needs, which are scalable at, scalability at a very low cost while always improving UX and UI so that everybody is fulfilled and everybody has a win-win situation in the space.
Awesome. And I'm just going to plug this in. If you're looking to launch, anyone to have full OFAC compliance, there's a identity verification attestation that can do that with Civic.
Right, exactly why we will also work with you guys on that. So yeah, very excited to see also like the upcoming features that you guys will be releasing. I think it's gonna be very interesting because we see more and more of these sort of security layers and decentralized ID that will come into play, and that will be more than happy to also support on the different rollups that we launch. Of course, there should be a need for it, like perhaps like gaming projects might not need it as much as an RWA project, but regardless, I think it's a very interesting time to be alive in the blockchain space with a lot of different innovation and that come in. So stay tuned, because I think there will be a lot more cool things that will be coming up both at Civic and Gelato in general.
Oh, Christophe, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on at ETHDenver with us in the podcast studio to record this. I'm super excited about what's coming forward, like coming up with the Rollups-as-a-Service and the fact that like we can bring identity to these spaces as well. So to wrap things up, thanks everyone for tuning in. This is not our typical kind of live adventures, but recorded adventures. So still awesome to have this chat. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on your favorite platform. Helps us grow, helps us bring content. And don't forget to check out civic.com and learn more about what we do. Over and out.